Hey guys, it's Brie. So I literally just tried to record this video and it was like 16 minutes long and I thought that's a bit ridiculous. So I'm hoping this one's going to be a little bit shorter and bear with me if it's not though. But okay, so today's video is on ME, or chronic fatigue syndrome as it's also known. I went back to dancing yesterday and of course consequently today I am aching everywhere. But I wanted to make this video because I remembered seeing a comment from someone saying they'd just been diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome and they wanted to know more about it, how I cope with it, that sort of thing. So I figured, you know, it'd probably be a really good video to do today, as I'm kind of on a high about the fact that I managed to go back to dancing and cope with a 3.5-hour dance class, which is a long time for someone with ME. And yeah, so I'm just gonna go straight into it. ME stands for myalgic encephalomyelitis, and chronic fatigue syndrome is pretty self-explanatory. The one big misconception with chronic fatigue syndrome is that it's just chronic fatigue, that you're just tired. That is not the case. In fact, to be officially diagnosed with ME, you have to have 8 of the 13 main symptoms of it. I don't quite meet this criteria. I actually only have 7 of the 8 symptoms of chronic fatigue syndrome. But my ME doctor, when I spoke to him, he's an ME specialist, he said to me that all of my symptoms fitted in with the pattern of chronic fatigue syndrome, so he was pretty sure that I had chronic fatigue syndrome and that 8th symptom I might have just forgotten to mention, or that it was going to develop at some point. And I think actually it was the fact that I've lost my eyesight, my long distance sight has gone quite bad, and that's often a symptom of ME as well. So that wasn't the case back in 2012, but that's definitely the case now, so I think that's probably the 8th symptom. But anyway, one of the other things about ME that's really difficult to deal with is the fact that it can mess with your brain. We call this brain fog, and it's where you basically struggle to concentrate, struggle to understand things as easily as you would. Like someone in my class, my teacher could say to me in class, you know, turn your books to page 83. You know, it's a very simple sentence, but to me it would take me 10 seconds to process what he'd actually said and what it meant, because my brain was just so slow. I think of it as, you know, you think of a little toddler who's got into your brain and gone around and, also not a toddler, so think of someone who's hacked into your brain and changed the passwords to the different areas of your brain, so it takes you longer to access those parts of your head. That's how I describe it, you know, we're just a little bit slower, but also it can actually affect your ability to understand things and to write and all that sort of stuff, and that's really frustrating, especially if it hits you really bad. For me, it did when I was in year 11, so I was 15. That's my last year of doing GCSEs, and actually it hit me so bad that I couldn't finish my GCSEs. And I did try originally, and one of the things you learn quite quickly with chronic fatigue syndrome is that you just can't control it. So if it's going to get bad, it's going to get bad. Like, there's nothing you can do to stop it. You can try all you want to just, like, you know, work really hard and get through GCSEs, but if it's going to hit you bad, there's nothing you could do. It's going to hit you. And I find that it's just easier to hit rock bottom sometimes. And the other way I describe that is that if you get diagnosed with ME, it's like having an anchor tied around your ankles when you're trying to climb out of a hole. And just imagine you've got to claw your way up and it gets so tiring. At some point you just feel like you're slipping down slowly into this hole, and the best thing to do sometimes is just to let go and fall all the way down to the bottom, because then once you're at the bottom you can take the rope that's holding the ankle off your, the rope that's holding the anchor from around your ankles, take it off and look at it and think, right, I've got ME. What can I do? How can I make this easier for myself? Because you've got to take this anchor. This ME is attached to you. No matter what you want to do, you have to carry this anchor. And the thing I think of is, you know, tie it on your back. If you've ever seen people baby wearing, it's because it's easier to hold to take the weight on your back, on your shoulders. So then you perhaps tie it on your back and start climbing out again. You'll discover, hang on, you know, this is still tiring, but it's a lot easier to do this. So sometimes you really need to figure out a way to carry the load of ME that's much easier for you. Now, for some people like me, you know, I hate, and this is one of the things I hate when I see parents do, and I see it quite a lot actually with children who have parents who are really pushy and they've been diagnosed with ME. They're just like, right, you have to go to school, we have to get this done, this is the one thing that's really important, because it just is not. And I'm sorry to say this, like, I'm going to have a lot of people probably going off me for this, but it's, your health is the most important thing, not your grades. Because the thing is, you might get good grades by pushing your child really hard, but then what's going to happen is they're going to become so sick there's actually nothing they can do with their grades because they're stuck in bed. Like, what the heck is the point of having really good GCSEs when you can't do anything because your child's now so sick that they're stuck in the bed? Like, it just never made sense to me, like, why parents would do that. But you can see it's because of the whole society. We think you've got to do this, 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 and that's not the case. Yes, it's the case that for a lot of people it's easier to do that, but, you know, it doesn't always work, I'm afraid. But the other thing is that even if you can't go to school, remember there are other options. You can have a tutor. You could take an extra year to do those GCSEs. You know, it might take you longer and it will obviously separate you from your friends, but it's still possible to do it. And you could do what I'm doing, which is taking a big break and then maybe go back to it, or if I can avoid it, never go back to it. But yeah, so it's not the end of the world. I mean, I thought it was when I stopped my GCSEs because I was really scared, you know. That's what I've been told to do. You have to get your GCSEs, you have to do that, like you're going to get nowhere without it. But I don't have my GCSEs. I mean, I have 2 of the modules, but I didn't manage to finish the 3rd because by the 2nd one I was so sick. The only thing I was bothered about in the exam was whether or not I was actually going to throw up on the table. Didn't care a crap about like what the actual paper was about. So that's how the illness can get, you know, you stop caring at some point because you're just so sick, it's like, what's the point? And yeah, so it can be really frustrating in that sense, but there's always time and you can always go back to it later, so don't panic about that, would be my main thing, you know. Education, it never vanishes, you can always go back to it, take it again, you know, take longer to do it, study the subjects that only you are really interested in if you know what you want to do. But you know, I'm living proof that it can work because I'm here, I'm running my own business, running a YouTube channel, doing all these crazy things, and I haven't finished my GCSEs either, so it's possible, it's not the end of the world. But the other thing is, a lot of people tend to stop all their hobbies, and that's not necessarily a great thing. I stopped all of mine except one, which was dance at the time. I did take a year off last year because I did get very sick, but I went back to it on Saturday, yesterday. And I'm really thrilled I managed to survive, as I said before. But you know, for me, dance is my emotional outlet. So if I'm really frustrated, and you know, we lose control of our bodies with chronic fatigue syndrome or any invisible illness, and you know, just being able to dance and being able to let out those emotions is really good because, you know, I can't say for definite that I wouldn't have done things like tried to starve myself or cut or beat myself up, you know. There are some pretty low places you can sink with illnesses like this, and I know a lot of people with chronic fatigue syndrome who have started to cut themselves and beat themselves up and starve themselves because of it. But dancing gives you a safe way to control your emotions, so actually it's not necessarily a good thing to stop all those hobbies you do, and that's the thing that a lot of people can understand, is like why my parents would allow me to stop going to school but allow me to continue dancing. And you can only know that if you've got chronic fatigue syndrome, and you will probably get people saying the same thing, like, why did you stop if you could do that but can't do this, like, blah, 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 blah. It just happens, I'm afraid you'll have to deal with it, but you will know the reasons, and that's the important thing. So, the other thing I can say about chronic fatigue syndrome is giving yourself daily goals, and they might be catered to whatever part of the scale you're on. I should have mentioned that as well. With ME, there's a scale. There's 0% to 100%, and the thing that's really, really annoying for us as people who have the illness is that ME is quite a common illness, so somebody probably knows someone else who has chronic fatigue syndrome, or someone very close to them, and they're probably at a different point on the scale, because at 0% you are in bed, unable to feed yourself, so you have to have a feeding tube, barely able to open your eyes, you know, you're that tired and that fatigued. And then there's the other end of the scale where you can still go to school, only be a little bit tired and feel a little bit sick from time to time, but you know, you still do most of what you could do beforehand. And the problem is, for me, I had this scale, well, there's always 2 instances I seem to find with this. The first one is that either you are a lot better than someone else with chronic fatigue syndrome that someone else knows about. So I might have a friend who has a brother who has chronic fatigue syndrome, and he might be a lot worse, you know, having to use a wheelchair constantly, you know, really, really tired and a bunch of other symptoms. And then they will say to me, well, you know, how come you have this illness? Because my brother can't do this, and, you know, you can do this and stuff, so I don't think you have the illness. And people don't understand that there's a different places on that scale, and then there's the other way around where you are a lot worse than someone else, and you have a friend who's got a sister who can, I'm just using examples, brother or sister, it can affect you equally. A friend who's got a sister who has chronic fatigue syndrome who is, you know, good enough to go to school and stuff, who can, you know, do a lot of stuff but get tired, and then you're there struggling, you've got knee problems, you have to use crutches, you can't go to school all the time, and they'll say to you, well, you know, my sister has this, and she can do this, and she can do that, why can't you do this? Because you have the same illness. And it's like, come on, it's not the same thing, you know, we could be at completely separate ends of the scale, but you still have the same illness. So one thing to bear in mind, if you know someone with chronic fatigue syndrome, doesn't necessarily mean that someone else with chronic fatigue syndrome has the same symptoms or is at the same point on that scale. That's a pretty crucial thing I forgot to mention in the other video actually. So that's a pretty big one, and you will probably encounter that if you have chronic fatigue syndrome. So if you know someone with chronic fatigue syndrome and you've said that to them, please apologise. It is horrible when people do it. It's the most annoying thing about ME, I think, is just that part of it. But yeah, so wherever you're on the scale, you have to kind of cater your needs to that. And with the daily to-do list, I have a file of facts actually that I just got, and that a really sweet friend of mine has sent me some stuff for, which are so cute, you know. But yeah, so I have a file of facts, and you don't need something that expensive actually. Just need a little notebook and put daily to-do lists on it, and just have 5 things or 3 things or 1 thing that you want to achieve in that day. And it could be as simple as getting up and going downstairs to get some sun, because I rarely go outside apart from when I'm forced to by my parents, or getting yourself a drink, or remembering to drink lots of water, or it could actually be to go and drop something off at the post office, you know, anything. Because being able to tick off those things really helps your self-esteem, thinking, yes, I achieved this task today, even if it's a really small thing. For you, it might be really big. So that's one of my biggest tips, I think, if you have ME, is just set yourself a daily task and just, you know, work through what you think you can manage and what you can't. Don't set yourself something ridiculous. You know, if you're struggling to get out of bed, don't say that you want to go on a bike ride around the block, because that's just never going to happen. But yeah, just do something to what works for you. So I hope this helped explain ME to you guys a little bit more. Like I said, I didn't want this video to get too long, but it probably has anyway. So thanks for watching, guys. Please subscribe and check out my links below, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is actually making adjustments to your life to be able to balance things that you really want to do with things that you kind of have to do is a really good way to help achieve things. So for example, I really did love making the cloth pads, but it is very energy draining, and I really wanted to go back to dancing. So I had to make that change very recently, as you guys probably know about, where I couldn't actually make the pads myself anymore, but I got them imported from somewhere else. So another thing is just a big thank you to everyone who's still supporting me with that, because, you know, being able to make that change, so yes, I can't make the pads anymore, but I can still sell the products that I love. Just had to change it around a bit, so now I can do that and I can go to dancing. So, you know, just making those little adjustments really helps you to achieve things. And so big thank you to everyone who's still supporting me through that, because it has meant that I can make that change and, you know, be a lot happier with what I'm doing and not struggling so much now. But so, yeah, thank you guys.